Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. Today I want to talk to you about Jewish influence in Soviet Russia. You might say, why would I care about that? What does that have to do with me today? We've got this great comment on Rumble on part 9 of the Holocaust series from 1202067 is his name. And so Wednesday and Thursday are going to be these, I didn't even know this stuff existed. These beautiful Einsatzgruppen reports. Love to talk about that. It's absolutely hilarious and but very informative. But in order to understand what's going on in those reports, you have to understand the Jewish influence in Soviet Union, right? So I'm just going to go over it pretty quickly. Basically, you got generally the idea of communism existed before Marx, but he wrote it down in Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto, and so then that became Marxism. And of course, Karl Marx was a Jew, but it's not a real thing. It's just a political ideology. Where it's put into practice, it becomes something unique based on the culture of the people there, the intelligentsia who are actually putting together the policies. So in Russia, we're going to see Leninism versus Trotskyism. Then we're going to see Stalinism later. But in another place, like you have Maoism or Gaddafi's The Green Book, which we covered, and he had his own little communist thing going there. Worked great for him. But I mean, until the end. So each communist doesn't have to be Jewish, though it frequently is, but it's not a fundamental part of it. It's not required. But in this case, I'm basically going to show how it was very Jewish in the specific version. So this is not Marxism. This is a specific version that the USSR took, the Soviet Union. So basically what happened is during World War I, there was a bunch of communist, New York communist Jews, and the United States shipped them to Germany. Germany sent them to Russia through the lines that they were battling. And they went in there. Basically, the revolution started. And so at one point, the Russians just put down their guns and just left. They're like, we're done. And the Germans like, we can have this? Yeah, cool, have it. So then anyways, they took as much land as they wanted. They ran their eastern divisions to the Western Front, which would pretty much guarantee them the victory. Then they were stabbed in the back, if you believe that. We presented that idea before. So anyways, basically what happens then is there's a revolution, and then it's followed by the Civil War in the USSR. And so you have the White Russians against the Reds, and the White Russians are, you can guess, the good guys, and they are the Christians, and the Reds are the communists. And so basically the communists win, and Lenin becomes the dictator of the Soviet Union in its early stage. And so Vladimir Lenin was a dictator from 1917 to 1924. Now, if you look anywhere, it'll tell you that he's Jewish, and I'll give you the truth on this. I could just say that like everybody else says, but I got a really good reference in the story. When I screenshot it, it was 9 different files. There's so much information in there, just screenshotting the entire page. So it's a really good reference. I think the stuff's very credible in it. And in it points out that Lenin was 1/4 Jewish by his grandfather, which, as you know, Jewish whatever goes through the matriarchal, so like it wouldn't qualify him. Even under Nazi Germany, when they had the Nuremberg laws where they got down with Jews and then agreed to the terms of like what is race, what constitutes this and that, the rule was 1/4. So if a person's 1/4 Jewish and 3/4 German, they're just German, and it just breeds out pretty rapidly. So anyways, I would say no, he's not Jewish. Part Jewish, you could say. Now, Leon Trotsky, who's the father of Trotskyism, his born name was Lev Davidovich Bronstein. And so they had conflicting ideologies somewhat. And then at one point they came to a truce and said, hey, we're just going to make the best as we can because the infighting is terrible, and not physical fighting, but just the political infighting. And so then Trotsky became second in charge to Lenin. So basically, Lenin's going to die in 1924. He's the dictator. And let's go back to the beginning. So when it very first starts, what they say is 80% of the government was Jewish, and that's not too far off, but it's not really true. So what they do is they say the 1917 to 1918 Politburo, 6 of 8 were Jewish, 75%, and the dictator, making the number 7 of 9 were Jewish, which gives them the 80% number. But I'm not counting Vladimir Lenin as Jewish because he's a dictator in 1917. So I'm going to count it 6 of 9. So I'm going to put it at 66% of the original government was Jewish. But that's a phenomenal number. I think they were 5% of the country or something like that. So it's just obviously they're in charge. And so what they do there is during this period, they create a two-tier system of governance. So they just like Putin today, he wants to do the Russification. He wants these people, and he wants them to speak Russian. They did the same thing there. You're from one of these places. So this is before World War II. So we're not talking about the Eastern Bloc. We're talking about actual places in the USSR, not satellite states. They want you to speak Russian. They want you to be an atheist, and they have all these rules. And there wasn't a rule that you had to be an atheist, but they persecuted pastors and stuff and priests. Then they did a propaganda campaign about how stupid God and church are, I guess, and how great atheism is. And then they infused it into all their cultural stuff so that your kids would grow up atheists, whether you liked it or not. That was their plan. It wasn't technically illegal. But then what happened is, because the Jews were in power, for the most part, they had another tier where it's like, oh, but if you're Jewish, you could speak Yiddish. Because remember, Hebrew hadn't revived at this time, so they spoke Yiddish there, right? And they're like, oh, but if you're Jewish, you could still go to synagogue. We're not going to say anything bad against that. So they had this two-tiered system, which of course caused a lot of anti-Semitism, because when you're being ruled by a very small minority and they're making laws for themselves, to think that HB 6090 hate crime law, just think about that. And then it infuriates the people, so that happens. Anyways, so basically, if I could just fast forward a little bit. So Lenin's going to die in 1924, and his body just ceases to function, and he's stroking out. There's no accusations that there was anything behind that. And so then Stalin takes over, but Stalin takes over in 27, so I don't really understand. It said Stalin took over right after that, but he also took over in 27, so I don't quite understand. Anyways, Stalin was in power from 1927 to 1953. Trotsky's alive. He flees to Mexico. Eventually in 1940, Stalin sends an NKVD, a Spaniard who's an NKVD agent, down there, and he's murdered with an ice axe in his study. So that happens. And then they have a funeral for him in Mexico City, and hundreds of thousands of people come to his funeral to walk by his coffin. Pretty interesting. So basically 38.5% of those holding the most senior posts in the Soviet security apparatuses were of Jewish origin. So I like the movie Enemy at the Gate. When you see that movie, you got this nice Russian soldier, or he's being portrayed as a nice Russian soldier who's just being pushed into being the sniper and this and that. But the guy pushing him, the bad guy in the story, we'll say, unless you think it's the Nazis, is the commissar. So he's the Jewish guy, and all these troops, and sometimes they don't want to do some of the things that they're ordered to do, and the commissars will report you if you even flinch at anything, because you have to be completely ideological on their side. Now, so people were very ideologically on their side because of all the conditioning and the propaganda. But what happened if you weren't on their side? So I'm going to talk about two specific events that I'm glad I researched, because I get them confused, honestly. So the first one's called the Red Terror, right? It was a campaign of political repression and executions in Soviet Russia carried out by the Bolsheviks, chiefly through the Cheka, the Bolshevik secret police. It officially started in early September 1918 and lasted until 1922. So in this event, more than 700,000 people were killed. So this is a purge. So who do early Soviets want to purge? They want to purge all of the good guys. So they want to purge the pastors. They want the anti-communists, the anti-Semites, because they're being ruled over by a small minority, So it kind of makes sense. Anyway, so basically they want to kill all the good people. So that happened. And then, so much later, so Stalin's in power in 1927. We're now getting close to the beginning of World War II in 1939. And so it's now 1937. Well, okay, that's not actually true. This is from 1936 to 1938. 1937 is in the name, but technically it's 1936 to 1938. So basically, the Great Purge happened. It was also called the Great Terror, also known as the Year of the 37, and not even try that word, was Soviet General Secretary Joseph Stalin's campaign to consolidate power over the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and state. The purges also sought to remove the remaining influence of Leon Trotsky. Okay, in this, 700,000 to 1.2 million died. So this was just, they were purging officers. There's a lot of people in the Great Purge, the second one, were military. And it was just everybody who doesn't conform ideologically. So when you go back to that situation of the commissar and the soldier, he knows what will happen if it's going to be terrible. What's going to happen if he is against anything. So then that's how you got so much conformity. And so basically, the Jews had a drastically overwhelming amount of power compared to their how much they were in the population. But it was also very apparent because of the two-tier system. It wasn't like they were like when AIPAC does ads and then they don't even talk about Israel, though. You know, they're getting the guy out because of Israel and he's going to lose. And also, if you watched our video on the Indiana election where I talked about that guy, it was about Victor was here probably about 6 weeks ago. Anyways, yeah, he lost, resoundingly lost. And he shouldn't have, but, you know, we covered the specific ads and stuff. Anyways, so that's a more subtle way to do it because it doesn't inspire as much anti-Semitism. Now, the way they did it is terrible. And it brings up a ton of anti-Semitism, but you can't even be anti-Semitic because, of course, they'll murder you because the Soviet Union wasn't great, we'll just say. Okay, so here's a picture I put on the screen, and basically it just shows a bunch of, you'd have to zoom in on this to see, but basically it's a bunch of commissars, a bunch of top revolutionaries, chief of secret police of the NKVD. Here's the butcher of Ukraine. Multiple people who are involved, and these are all Jewish people. Multiple people who were involved in the assassination of the Romanovs, the founder of the NKVD. This guy masterminded. Okay, in the middle, second from the bottom, that bald guy. He masterminded the Katyn Forest massacre, which is a terrible story for Poles. Hilarious how the world handled it. Founders of Gulag death camp system, it says, sorry. And deputy heads of the Gulag, just all these people are Jews, you know. NKVD chief of operations, top Bolshevik revolutionaries, just all types of stuff. So anyways, basically tomorrow, it's not tomorrow at all, Wednesday and Thursday, I'm going to talk about these Einsatzgruppen reports. We're going to talk about the authenticity of them, and then we're going to actually read some of these reports. And we're going to see some of this stuff that that the Russians have done, and then we're going to see the reaction from the Nazis. And if you don't understand this relationship with the Jews and Soviet Union, it looks like the Einsatzgruppen reports look like the Nazis are just maniacs going out there and just liquidating. They're literally liquidating everybody, you know. But then when you see it in regards to this story, you'll be like, oh, okay, got it. And then it's actually pretty hilarious. Church attendance is high. They end the reports on it, you know, because the mission's successful. Anyway, so that's coming up Wednesday and Thursday, and that'll be part 11 of the Holocaust series, which will be part A and B because I'm going to do it in two because there's just so much to go over. And I hope to see you there.